Hello everyone, my name is Sulaiman, a retired economics lecturer and former Director of Quality Assurance, Sa'adat Rimi College of Education, Kumbos, Kano. I am making a virtual presentation at the 6th Symposium on Education in Muslim Societies, Implications for Policy, Pedagogy, Training and Development, conducted at the American University in Washington, D.C., USA, from November 11th to 13, 2022. The title of my paper is A Study of Curriculum Reform Needs for Technical and Vocational Education and Training for Muslim Societies in Northern Nigeria. Part 1, Introduction. This presentation essentially covers research questions, literature review, methodology, and findings of a study on curriculum reform needs for TVET for Muslim societies, mostly found in northern Nigeria. Part 2, research questions. The content analysis on the 14 documents included in this study was guided by the following questions. Number 1, which types of curriculum reform needs are shown by inferences made from the analysis of the sample documents? Number 2, are there curriculum reform needs that impliedly indicate the need for community-based curriculum for Muslim societies in northern Nigeria? And lastly, what is the general view of the writers of the sample documents on the adequacy of the Tibet curriculum in meeting community and labor market needs? The third part of the paper is literature review. First part of the review is on Tibet reforms in Muslim societies. In Bangladesh, for example, the 2007 to 2017 Tibet reform was made to ensure the country's competitiveness in the global market and reduce poverty through quality vocational education and training. The literature review also covers some expressions of curriculum reform needs in some literature. For instance, writing on the curriculum challenge for Islamic schools in America, Farida Sharma argues compellingly that this challenge was central to Muslim education, not only in that country, but also in all Muslim societies and communities. A study by Ismail and Hassan 2013 stated that Tibet programs in Malaysia were largely supply-driven and lacking emphasis in matching training to available jobs. Training institutions rarely track the employment destination of their graduates, hence they do not use feedback from past trainees to improve their curricula and training packages. Fourth part of the paper is methodology. The research design is content analysis, which has been defined as a research technique for making replicable and valid inferences from texts or other meaningful matter to the context of their use. Data collection method. The documents related to the state of Tibet in Nigeria were found through the use of the Google search engine. In addition, book chapters dealing with Tibet issues and community participation in education were obtained from a relevant book of readings. The scope of the study covered curriculum and community participation issues related to Tibet in journal articles, book chapters, and newspaper articles written from 2006 to 2021. The data was analyzed with the use of abductive inferences. An example of an abductive inference is determining the political affiliation of newspaper editors from the editorials they write. The findings are presented under the 3 research questions that guided the study. The first question is, which types of curriculum reform needs are shown by inferences made from the analysis of the sample documents? 9 types of needs were discovered. One of them is the need for a high school curriculum that is aligned to college and career readiness standards, adaptable to non-college bound students and globally competitive. There is also the need for institutions of learning, industries, and entrepreneurs to work together to formulate curriculum for Tibet and entrepreneurship. This is from the first document. The last need is the need for community-based curriculum for Muslim societies in northern Nigeria. The second research question is, are there curriculum reform needs that impliedly indicate the need for community-based curriculum for Muslim societies in northern Nigeria? The answer to this question is in the affirmative. There are three of these needs. The first one is the need for Tibet curriculum to meet labor market needs as well as developmental needs of communities. This is given by inferences for the third, fifth, sixth, and 12th document. The third and last research question is, what is the general view of the writers of the sample documents on the adequacy of the Tibet curriculum in meeting community and labor market needs? It was discovered that the general view of the writers is that the curriculum for Tibet at various levels of education in Nigeria does not adequately meet the current needs of the labor market and the communities it was meant to serve. This inadequacy also applies to the Muslim community in northern Nigeria, simply because Tibet curriculum is centrally developed by governmental bodies in Nigeria. The conclusion for the study is that there are 9 types of curriculum reform need shown by inferences made from the analysis of the 14 documents. One of them is the need for community-based curriculum for Muslim societies in northern Nigeria. Secondly, the general review of the writers on the sample document is that the curriculum for Tibet at various levels of education in Nigeria does not adequately meet the current needs of the labor market and the communities it was meant to serve. The policy implication for this study is a recommendation for a community-based curriculum that will supplement the national Tibet curriculum, ensure community participation, and accommodate socio-cultural diversity and variety. This diagram shows the 7-step procedure in designing community-based curriculum for Muslim societies. Number 1, setting up a curriculum design committee, that is CDC, by the relevant educational authorities at state or local government level. The committee will comprise Tibet experts, community members, regulatory authorities, entrepreneurs, and employers of labor. Step 2, identification and quantification of community resources such as rivers, forests, population, industries, and schools at village, town, and local government levels by the CDC or its representatives. Step 3, identification of community problems such as insufficient water for irrigation or industrial use, lack of electricity, poor sanitation, low-level basic or financial literacy, frequent natural disasters, etc. at village, town, and local government level by the CDC or its representatives. Step 4, census of entrepreneurs and businesses at ward, village, and town levels by the CDC or its representatives, with a view to determining their number, size, addresses, types of products or services they produce, their needs for raw materials, manpower, and skills, etc. Step 5, identification of moral values of Muslim communities by the CDC in terms of the teachings of Islam as regards work and business ethics, and also of community goals for self-reliance. The values should then be incorporated into the Tibet curriculum for all levels of education and for short vocational courses, so as to produce pious graduates and trainees who will later become responsible workers, managers, and industry leaders. Step 6. Creating a forum for CDC members to interact with stakeholders such as community leaders, employers of labor, philanthropists, and local entrepreneurs to discuss Tibet issues with them, and also get their inputs and support on what the community-based curriculum will contain and how they can take part in its implementation. The last step is the CDC, in conjunction with independent group of consultants and cognate experience, should be evaluating the implementation of the curriculum and reviewing it after every 3 years or when a new challenge, problem, or opportunity arises. The references for this presentation are provided here, but other references can be found in the full version of the paper. On this note, I have come to the end of this presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Hi, my name is Dr. Athar Osama, and I, along with my partner, Professor Nidhal Guessoum of the American University of Sharjah, are here to talk about science culture in the Muslim world and its implications for policy and educational approach. We are very thankful to the organizers of the Advancing Education in Muslim Societies Symposium 2022 to give us the opportunity to talk about our research. Before we talk about this further, I just want to lay out the context in which this work was carried out. This was part of a task force on the culture of science in the Muslim world that was organized on the sidelines of the World Science Forum in 2017 in Jordan. The task force was chaired by Her Highness Princess Sumaya bint Al Hassan, the chairperson of the Royal Scientific Society of Jordan, and convened by Professor Nidhal Guessoum and Dr. Munir Saudi, who was the Director General of the Islamic Academy of Sciences at the time. The task force contained several members. Some of them came from the world of policy, others from science communication, science popularization, science media education, as well as some people from religious background as well. And all of them came together to reflect upon the causes of decline of scientific culture in the Muslim world, and to try to come up with recommendations on how to improve this. Before I delve further into what we did and what we concluded, I would like to lay out some definitions. Let's define science literacy and culture, because there are several definitions that are used out there. And for simplicity's sake, we use the definition put forward by U.S. National Science Foundation education standards, in which science literacy is the knowledge and understanding of scientific concepts and processes required for personal decision making, participation in civic and cultural affairs, and economic productivity. For science culture, we use the following definition: the appreciation, adoption, and application of scientific principles at the individual and societal level. This is the definition put forth by Dr. Munir Saudi of the Islamic Academy of Sciences. And while there are several definitions out there, these two definitions kind of serve our purpose. So why is science literacy so important? Obviously, science and technology play a critical role in our lives, in healthcare, food, environment, economy. Virtually every aspect of our lives is impacted by science and technology. There are also policy issues such as GMO, nuclear energy, climate change that draw upon a certain level of science literacy in a society. And also science and technology continuously impact our lives. And so we need a certain degree of science and technology literacy in the society to be able to sort of navigate some of these issues. There are obviously, science literacy tests in the US and much of the developed world, such as OECD. This is one science literacy score that is reported, in the National Science Foundation's National Science and Engineering Indicators of 2018. It sort of ranks countries by the average number of questions that are answered by a random sample of people within each of these countries. As you can see, Canada leads the world, and sort of, Russia is at the lowest, in this rank. You also see Malaysia in this, in this list as well. In the Muslim world, we don't really know the levels of science literacy because most of the Muslim countries do not participate in such tests. Only perhaps Malaysia, Turkey, and Kazakhstan have participated in some of these tests, and whenever Muslim countries have actually participated in in these tests, they score quite low, which has rung serious alarms. So the general notion obviously is that the Muslim world readily accepts and consumes high technology from from cell phones to HDTVs and high tech instruments of medical diagnosis, but it largely ignores basic non-applied science and tends to go towards an ultra utilitarian view. Also in intellectual debates, science seldom emerges as a subject of deliberation, and that's an issue of much concern to us. So while the task force deliberated upon this topic in a very qualitative manner, and not just during the meetings at the World Science Forum, but also after that, we were deeply aware of the fact that there's not much data, and there is no way for us to actually quantify what the state of science literacy or culture was in the Muslim world. So just before pandemic, we did an informal survey, an informal online survey of science literacy, attitudes and culture in the Muslim world. About 3,000 people from all over the world participated in the survey. 80% of them were from the Arab world and Pakistan, and these were surveyed through the internet in multiple languages such as English, Arabic, Urdu, and Turkish. Two waves of survey were done in March 2020 and June 2020, so just prior to and after the pandemic hit. The survey questionnaire comprised of 3 sections. There were 10 questions on science literacy, 11 questions on attitudes towards science, and 7 questions on people's understanding of the nature of science, which we construe as as an indicator of scientific culture in a society. So the section A on science literacy contained questions like the age of the earth is, age of the earth is approximately this much. All animals and plants have DNA. The sex of a newborn baby is determined by the father's gene, the mother's genes, or both fathers and mother's genes. And these are sorts of questions that generally appear in science literacy tests around the world, such as the OECD countries, and we use very similar questions as well. In the section on attitudes, we made statements like, science brings more to humans than just technology. Governments should fund scientific research regardless of its immediate and practical benefit to the society. And there should be no censorship in scientific research, etc. So the respondents were asked to, strongly agree or strongly disagree. And this was done on a 5-point Likert scale, so we could get some variation as well. In the section on science culture, we probe for people's understanding about the deeper nature of science and the way science works and the nuances of the nature of science. So, for example, we asked statements like science is the way to understand how nature and the universe work. Science theories are infused with social, cultural, political values as well as philosophical assumptions. Knowledge of what science is, what it can and cannot do, and how it works is important for us all. And again, people were asked to read these statements on a scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree on a 5-point Likert scale. Here are some of the results of the survey. On science literacy, we found that our respondents performed roughly as well as those in other surveys. For example, those that are carried out in the OECD. So our respondents performed roughly at the average of the OECD level, with some variations across questions. Obviously the OECD surveys are surveys of random populations, and ours is probably a biased sample towards more technologically literate and those people who have access to internet, etc. So obviously these two are not exactly comparable. I think our survey overestimates science literacy in the population. There were some also interesting and rather unexpected differences between those who were answering the survey in their native languages such as Urdu and Arabic versus the second language such as English. So those who answered in Urdu and Arabic tended to have more correct answers on certain kinds of questions, and this can be explained by access to more information literature in about certain subjects in local languages, and interest of certain types of population in certain kinds of subjects. On the attitudes towards science, our main conclusion was that the statements on the value and importance of science to humanity received extremely strong agreements, but again, there was no noticeable difference between, with respect to the level of education or the years of science education. Respondents were also split on whether there should be any censorship in scientific research, but about 78% believe that there should be no restriction on teaching of science. And again, native language effects were there. So, people who responded to the survey in Arabic and Urdu seem to have more extreme positions. Either they strongly agreed or they strongly disagreed, versus more nuanced views of those who had responded in English. On the question of culture of science, 80% of the respondents with less than 10 to 12 years of education disagreed with the idea that science is a way to understand how nature and the universe work. Those with college education agreed with the statement. Similarly, the effect of college education is particularly pronounced among Arabic and Urdu respondents, and goes away amongst English-speaking respondents. Again, potentially pointing towards the effect of pre-college schooling in Arabic and Urdu and teaching of certain types of concepts there. We also found diametrically differing views between those who responded in the native language versus those who responded in English on several questions. And again, this is something that we note with some concern, and it has significant implications towards how education and media works in the Muslim world. One key exception was the question of whether scientific theories are refused with social, cultural, political, philosophical assumptions. There, the opinion was rather split between 40% agreed and 25% disagreed, and 35% were neutral. Some general conclusions about the culture of science. I think there's a role of censorship by social powers and authorities, including political, religious, and administrative authorities. Even in some Muslim countries, universities do not allow professors to speak directly to the media. There's also the role of self-censorship, even when there's no direct, instruction not to say something. There's often self-censorship. I think there's also the role of social media. And although while social media has leveled the field, it has also resulted in importing Western standards and idols, and helped spread pseudoscience in some cases. Weak societal outreach and public disinterest, due to culture of entertainment, some of the societies. With regards to science and culture, I think science needs to connect to the popular culture of everyday life with special focus on young people. Science needs freedom, openness, and diversity, and the current proliferation of dogmatism in the Islamic societies works against the culture of science, and is a cause of major concern. We need to find new ways of promoting science literacy and culture. We need new role models, new engagement forms, and a mutual understanding with the religion. Similarly, the role of digital culture is often seen as negative, and it leads to free mixing of science and pseudoscience and conspiracy theories. And I think scientists, educators, and communicators have a role to play in this. Education and media, we believe, is the key. Our survey has revealed intriguing insights into the role of education and language, which is probably transmitted through schools and media. The references between those who prefer to answer the questions in Urdu and Arabic are reflective of the kind of scientific education and media that is consumed in local languages. And I think that is something that needs to be further explored and investigated and addressed. The task force has also made several important novel recommendations with respect to education. For example, we focus on holistic, liberal education, as well as an emphasis on experimentation. Finally, the survey, despite its limitations in scope and limitations in scope and methodological rigor, has pointed into fruitful directions. And we feel a comprehensive survey of science literacy, attitudes, and culture needs to be repeated across the Muslim world with greater academic rigor to further substantiate and prove these findings. So these are some of the key conclusions and recommendations, and we will be very happy to answer any questions.
Hi everyone, my name is Noor Hamwy. I'm a research assistant at the Educational Research Center at the College of Education at Qatar University. I'm honored and excited to be able to present today at the AEMS Symposium. I think it's a really great opportunity to showcase what's being done in Muslim majority countries in order to learn more about and adopt best practices that can advance educational standards fit for the needs of our communities. So our presentation today will be on mapping curriculum standards under SDG 4, the case of Qatar. I've been working on this project alongside Dr. Jennifer Bruder, Dr. Abdulatif Salami, and Dr. Michael Romanowski. This project is part of a sub-project aimed at examining curriculum and pedagogy from kindergarten to 12th grade. It is an exploratory study, and we're really looking to see what the curriculum standards contain and try to get a better sense of what is really happening on the ground through teacher practices, projects, and beliefs. The Qatar National Vision 2030 emphasizes Qatar's value in building human capital, and that can be further exemplified through taking a look at its first pillar, human development. Within human development, quality education is listed as a key component. Under its commitment to advance education, we can also see Qatar's demonstrated interest in the Sustainable Development Goals, highlighting key areas such as integrating a sense of citizenship and belonging, fostering critical skills like innovation and creativity, and the creation of educational institutions that are accessible for lifelong learning. Much of this language is embedded in SDG 4, which emphasizes quality education and lifelong learning. Qatar's interest in meeting the SDG goals can be seen through its funding of various projects and its starting various initiatives as well, such as EarthNA, its eco schools, its Quranic botanical garden, and this very research, which is funded by the Qatar National Research Fund. SDG 4.7 is especially significant because it seems to condense many important overarching themes related to education for sustainable development and global citizenship education, which are critical in and of themselves, but also because of the way these themes enable the other SDGs as well. So the vision for our project is to understand Qatar's progress in embedding these SDG goals, track this progress, and to find interventions and ways to assist Qatar to meet these goals, all while tailoring these interventions to the local context. So our research questions are primarily, how embedded are SDG goals in Qatar's curriculum documents, and how are these goals materializing in its public and private school education curriculum? There's a lot of literature on a global scale studying education in connection to the SDGs. And fortunately, there's been some research put towards the Qatari context as well. The studies largely show that the Qatar education system would still benefit from further study and greater curricular structure. They also suggest a lack of professional development opportunities for teachers, as well as a general lack of awareness of SDGs. These findings are especially important in setting the stage for our research and pinpointing the general needs of the Qatari educational system. Several limitations can also be identified through the literature. This includes the exclusive focus on specific grade levels. We aim to build on that and cover the various grade levels from K to 12. And there's also the difficulty of adopting more Western pedagogical practices that might not be easily transferable to this context. So an example is that some studies show that PBL, or project and problem-based learning, is a great way to facilitate learning and support 21st century skills. But there have been challenges that were identified when PBL was implemented in the Qatari context, possibly due to the difficulty of adopting these methodologies that might not be easily transferable. We plan on using both qualitative and quantitative methods to answer our research questions. So our first method here is to employ content analysis. We have access to some curriculum documents provided by the Ministry of Education and Higher Education on general standards for subjects, as well as extraneous documents covering things like schools' health and safety, physical exercise, environmental guidelines, etc. We'll be relying on SDG search queries produced by Elsevier. They've been specifically produced to help researchers track their SDG progress. They're also working with some other universities like the University of Auckland, which expanded this list and included further queries for its SDG Keywords Dictionary project. And we plan on using these keywords and expanding it to include keywords that are inspired by the Qatar National Vision 2030 that can reflect the goal to enhance Arab and Islamic values and identity. we'll be using MaxQDA to run this content analysis. Aside from the content analysis, we'll also be relying on focus groups, about 3 to 5, to really learn about what kinds of things teachers have been doing to implement SDGs in their teaching, what learning styles they're using, and what resources are available to them. We've also already launched a survey for middle and high school teachers. This has been adopted by a survey by UNESCO, which is a global survey. And this global survey was conducted by UNESCO from the 1st of March to the 25th of April in 2021, with the goal to understand teachers' motivation to implement SDG 4.7 related goals, including ESD, education for global citizenship, and education for sustainable development. It consulted well over 58,000 teachers and found that only 1/3 of teachers feel they can explain these issues well to their students. Although teachers had motivation to teach ESD and GCED, there were barriers present that overshadowed that. It also asks questions in a clever way where it looks at the individual level of teachers, in other words, their perceptions of their abilities and skills to teach topics in connection to SDGs, but it also asks systems level questions and to understand opportunities available and barriers present. So we use this, but face several challenges along the way, especially related to its length. We piloted the survey and we had to reduce the number of questions further by relying on previous research to really order things by matter of priority. We, of course, are still relying on questions that integrate the individual level and the systems level. But another important element is, or elements of this survey that we kept, are the dimensions of teaching ESD and GCED topics. These include the socio-emotional, the behavioral, the cognitive dimensions. And the cognitive dimension in particular is what's typically taught in schools. This is just the general information of the topic being taught. So in this case, for ESD, it would be the effects of climate change globally and in Qatar. But of course, the behavioral and socio-emotional dimensions have been shown to really enable effective learning outcomes, emphasize students' empathetic skills and their feelings of responsibility towards the planet. These are all important to enhance their civic duties and foster a sense of global citizenship. So by asking teachers these questions, we'd have a better sense of what teachers' practices really look like. And we also include a few open-ended questions in our survey, asking teachers what barriers are present, how they can be more supported in teaching SDG goals in their education, in their curriculum. This is an exploratory study, as I had mentioned before, so we're still in the works of mapping the curriculum, but we plan on producing these key outcomes. They include a website that can assist teachers, as well as some professional development opportunities. These emphasize the lifelong learning element and a focus on teachers' learning. We also plan on piloting a textbook produced by Dr. Jennifer Bruder, Leticia, and Reem. This project is called Who Am I? The Who Am I workbook is a really fun workbook that provides introspective questions and fun activities, which is important to building social and cultural awareness. The main characters of the book, Dana and Faisal, are dressed in a abaya and a Qatari thob. They have diverse interests and perspectives, showcasing the beauty and relatability of these characters, with the goal of supporting SDG 4.7 by really getting students to learn to be at peace with themselves and others. So the premise of this is to really show this idea that we are all unique, and yet we are all also similar at the same time. To give you a sense of what this looks like, the book takes you on a journey, beginning with students reflecting on their personhood, and then slowly moving up to view themselves in relation to the outside world. So you can kind of trace the map here. It begins with students really thinking about what they look like, their personality, and then moving up to their family, their social affiliations, cultural background, and then up to the global affiliation. We plan on piloting this workbook very soon and hope it will supplement students' education and learning trajectories. We expect that the results will highlight sustainable practices in Qatar, as well as any gaps that can be addressed. We expect this to facilitate policymakers at the Ministry of Education and Higher Education in their efforts to achieve SDG 4. And we also hope this can be transferable to other contexts, maybe especially emerging and Muslim majority countries. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to showcase our work. I look forward to receiving any questions.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our presentation entitled Islamic Education and Multi-Religious Citizenship. I'm Florian Pohl from Oxford College of Emory University, and with me is
Ahmad of Anshori from State Islamic University, Walisongo, Semarang, Indonesia.
And our presentation today follows the outline that the conference organizers suggested. And so we will start by briefly just pointing back to mid-November 2014, when we first became interested in our topic and started our collaboration. Both Afnan and I participated in the founding meeting of the Association for the Study of Religion in Indonesia, which were representatives from religious studies programs throughout the state system for Islamic state higher education. Participants there responded to challenges that they had experienced that had to do with dwindling numbers of students, kind of competition for funding, and also an overall sense of a negative reputation that the program had. And so they petitioned the participants there. They petitioned the Ministry of Religion that oversees the state Islamic higher education and the religious studies program. And argued within those petitions for the continued vital social relevance of the program, the study of religion, within the framework of Islamic higher education in a multi-confessional state such as Indonesia. Obviously, the question of religious studies and how education programs prepare students for life in multi-confessional states is relevant not just to Indonesia, but also beyond. And so we're particularly interested in asking how those who support the study of religion, studi agama-agama here SAA, how they assert the public priority of their vision of Islamic education, particularly how they articulate their view of religious diversity and support for religious citizenship in Indonesia. We want to briefly contextualize the beginnings of the study of religion within the state system and point back to the 1960s, when the program as comparative religion started under Mukti Ali, who became in the 1970s the Minister of Religious Affairs, a time during which he promoted perbandingan agama, comparative religion, throughout the state system. Mukti Ali very much connected the study of religion to larger social goals, the creation of social harmony, and moved interreligious dialogue into the center of the program. This emphasis and role persisted within comparative religion, also in the New Order era and beyond, in the Reform era. Herman Back in 2002 still called comparative religion, quote unquote, a pillar of social harmony. However, and Afnan can talk a little bit about this, more recently, some of the issues that I listed here have challenged the contributions of perbandingan agama, comparative religion, to the state system.
Yeah, well, I will look at contemporary issues that SA or PA face. The first is social, political, economic issues. The first is debate over what counts as properly Islamic or accusation of heterodoxy. There are outsiders that accuse PA or SA is not properly Islamic. This is the challenge that SAA or PA face. For example, attending churches for interreligious dialogue was often associated with not Islamic activities, which automatically contributes to negative image of the study program. The second, potential job prospects on concrete profession. SAA program through ASAI or Asosiasi Studi Agama that Pak Flo explained previously have proposed the government to provide job formation, concrete job formation for PA or SA alumni, especially those related to efforts of maintaining religious life in Indonesia, such as becoming teachers in the field of religious studies, religious harmony counselors, interreligious conflict mediators, activists and staff of FKOB or Religious Harmony Forum, and also researchers in religious studies. Okay, I will move to other issues. Another issues is educational issues that SAA or PA should respond to. The first is upgrading of school to state Islamic universities. Another challenge that PA or SAA study program face is how to fit into universities, which means changing name or nomenclature is not enough. More than that, the study program should also review the curriculums to fit the new change. The second one is I just want to give example about the changes, how PA or SAA fit the curriculum with new educational policy such as National Qualification Framework or KKNI and Merdeka Belajar or Freedom to Learn.
Our study is essentially a curriculum analysis. We're interested in looking at how, through the official curriculum, defenders of the study of religion kind of respond to the challenges that Afnan outlined. And so we're supplementing the analysis of these published documents with semi-structured interviews with program administrators. The curriculum for us, following Popkowitz, is a political, a discursive document, right? It shows us how proponents of the field respond to these challenges, tell us why the field is structured the way it is. And so we obviously acknowledge that as an official curriculum, these documents do not show us the operational curriculum, what happens inside the classroom. But we maintain that in terms of the discursive framing of the field, an analysis of the official documents is still quite productive.
From this slide, you can see the distribution of SAA program in Indonesia. It is not only in Java Island, but also in main islands of Indonesia. You can see Sumatra, and then Kalimantan, and also Sulawesi. So the distribution of SAA program in Indonesia reflect Indonesia as multicultural country in the world. Well, now let's see our findings. When we look at the curriculum, we see that there is openness to wide range of intellectual tradition and disciplinary perspectives. For example, there is sociological and anthropological aspects in curriculum. Next, pedagogically innovative and socially engaged to respond contemporary issues, contemporary social relevance. For example, in curriculum, they have course or classes in religion and human rights, religion and gender, religion and ecology. They also have community orientation called PPL or KKL. For example, student visit religious sites of other religion, and then they also invite experts from different religion to talk or to give a talk in their university. And there is also dialogue orientation is central here. So there are classes that enable students to meet and dialogue with other people from different religious traditions, not only interreligious relations such as Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism, but also intra-religious activities by inviting and doing interreligious dialogue with the Ahmadiyya community in Indonesia. And then another aspect is broad range of religious tradition, including non-recognized or local traditions such as local Javanese religion. Another thing is that as Florian cited about ASI or Asosiasi Studi Agama Indonesia, it tries to develop core curriculum for all SA programs, the curriculum that all study program must have. But each individual program has special focus, which is locally relevant content. For example, in Walisongo, they develop a program called Mediation and Conflict Resolution in collaboration with a Center of Mediation and Conflict Resolution in the university.
So our conclusions from these observations are first that we see a clear commitment shining through these curriculum documents to multi-religious citizenship. That doesn't mean that the curriculum documents always refrain from theological assessment of other religions. Quite the opposite. They sometimes confidently assert theological superiority of Islam over other religions. However, the field remains intimately connected to emphasizing the search for similarities across differences, and therefore emphasize interreligious dialogue as a means to promote social engagement and mutual understanding. Second, the conceptualization of religious diversity here happens within a normative Islamic framework. That means that it's not merely derivative of Western concepts, but rather ascribes a positive value to religious diversity in such a way that it is derived consistently from normative principles within the Islamic tradition, such as social justice, equality, human dignity. However, and this is our last point here, we're also aware that the success that promoters of the study of religion have here is not simply due to their ability or willingness to creatively, pedagogically innovate, to justify their inclusive views and the reference to foundational Islamic concepts. But we also see here that defenders of religious studies programs assert the public superiority of their vision of Islam under reference also, as Afnan pointed out earlier, to local traditions, and under reference to the Pancasila as Indonesia's foundational state philosophy and its de facto civil religion. So by highlighting how educators draw on shared practices and institutions that go beyond the individual, so local traditions such as Javanese traditions that place you in a local community, or the Pancasila that places you into a national community. So by drawing on these as sources of cultural legitimacy and power to defend their position, study of religion curriculum designers show here that strong personal religious identity isn't necessarily connected to animosity and hostility towards a religious outgroup. That indeed identification processes are more complex, that they can prioritize civic rather than religious identity. And so we see here as one of the strategic ways also a way to push back against essentializing views of religious identity and to assert that social identity construction within an Islamic educational context remains more fluid and potentially hybrid. And so we, just in the interest of time, we'll end it here. We have a couple, of course, also of caveats and limitations that we could point to that have to do with state incentives to develop a certain way, or the also kind of limiting and narrow history that the Pancasila as state ideology has. But we'll leave that hopefully for some Q&A if possible, and we'll show here briefly our selected bibliography and say thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to present our findings, and we'll look forward to sharing more soon.
I am Qazi Muqtul Islam, PhD student at Boston University, and I'll be presenting paper on gender bias in Bangladeshi school textbooks, not just a matter of politics or growing influence of Islamists. There is a growing consensus that female education has positive impact on human development, yet millions of girls are out of school in Muslim countries like Pakistan and Nigeria. Girls' schooling has risen sharply despite mass poverty in Bangladesh. Gender gap in enrollment at primary level has disappeared nearly 2 decades ago. Despite this, women remain socially marginalized and underrepresented in Bangladesh. Millions are pushed into child marriage. More than half experience violence from their intimate partners. Their participation in non-agricultural employment remains very low in Bangladesh. What explains this paradox? One possible way to understand this paradox is looking at what is happening in the school. Study shows that schooling can be a negative experience for girls as well, through its ideological orientation, teacher's attitude, or hidden curriculum that reinforces gender stereotypes. Therefore, this study tries to understand the paradox by looking at a key schooling indicator textbook. We are the first to assess gender stereotype in Bangladeshi textbooks across medium and time period. Bangladesh has a very heterogeneous education landscape. There are 25 providers catering to 35 million school-going children in Bangladesh. Broadly dividing the school types in Bangladesh, we have secular school. Within secular school, we have Bangla medium school that follows national curriculum and English medium schools that follow British curriculum. On the other hand, faith-based schools or madrasas, we have Alia madrasas that also follows national curriculum and Qawmi madrasas that follow Deobandi curriculum. The combined Alia and Qawmi madrasa enrollment accounts for 20% of secondary and primary school students in Bangladesh. The share of female students in madrasas has increased from 36% in 1990s to 55% now. The style of pedagogy, quality of learning, as well as worldview of the students and teachers vary across these mediums. Bangladesh's textbook Islamization controversy. The controversy surrounding politicization of learning material is not new. There is much international concern over saffronization of textbooks in India. The ruling parties in Bangladesh over the decades have used National Education Commission to advance their ideology. Similarly, in 2017, there was an allegation that the incumbent secular Awami League government has caved into the demands of Islamist group Hefazat Islam by silently rewriting the textbooks. The allegations were that lessons have been revised in a way that favors Islamic customs and views regarding a woman's social role and identity. In this context, this study wants to know how girls are actually represented in the newly printed Bangladeshi textbooks vis-a-vis the old ones across mediums. Hence, our research questions are, to what extent gender bias in the form of exclusion and misrepresentation exist in the textbooks? Does gender bias vary across mediums? Does gender bias vary across time periods? Gender bias leads to unequal treatment and discrimination towards one sex over the other. The sources of gender bias can be found outside of the schools. Poverty, hunger, market return to investment in girls, religious preferences, other sources of gender bias outside the schools. Within schools, schooling system, teachers' attitudes, and textbooks, other forms of gender bias. Gender bias in the textbooks of developed countries. Earlier studies in developed countries show high female exclusion and stereotypes in the textbooks. However, recent study shows more balanced presence of the two genders. In contrast, textbooks in South Asia show very low female visibility in the textbook. For instance, Afghanistan textbooks has only 21% female visibility in the textbook compared to 40% in Bangladesh. In Pakistan, it is between 20 to 30%. Same in India. In Nepal, it is 22% only. In this study, we used quantitative content analysis technique. Bangla and English language secondary school textbooks from grade 10 were analyzed. The table below shows that a total of 1,507 pages from 8 textbooks were analyzed. Our analysis of gender bias in textbook is based on two broad frameworks, exclusion and misrepresentation. We have identified 20 subcategories to analyze the two broad frameworks. The table below shows all these 20 subcategories. Findings. In terms of exclusion, the invisibility or exclusion of a particular group in textbooks is one form of gender bias. Overall, findings based on 18 exclusion indicators shows high female exclusion with an overall presence of 29.2% in our study. Secular school textbooks from 1996 has the highest female presence, and the textbooks of Qawmi Madrasa has the lowest presence. The bar graph below shows overall distribution of female presence in the textbooks. If we compare year-wise in all these mediums, we see that secular school textbook had the highest presence. However, their presence decreased in 2012's curriculum. On the other hand, Alia Madrasa's presence has increased over the years. Qawmi Madrasa's presence remained constant over the years. In terms of misrepresentation in roles, profession, and activity, we find high presence of women in domestic roles and very low presence in social roles. Similarly, overall professional roles assigned to female characters are very traditional and often lower in prestige and income. In our study, we also find that female share in indoor activities around almost 2/3% compared to just about 1/3 in outdoor activities. Ensuring access to inclusive and quality education is one of the 17 goals of Sustainable Development Goals. In recent years, Bangladesh has been lauded for its female-friendly education model, bringing million girls into schools. But most reforms were limited to only enrollment, without much attention given to what is being taught at the schools. Our study shows that gender bias is a problem both in secular and religious school textbooks. This study also argues that gender bias was widespread in government-recognized textbooks long before religious groups publicly demanded changes. Therefore, politicization of the debate on what children should learn in school can make further reforms much more harder to achieve. That's all. Thank you.